So you want to build your own computer, whether it's for work or extreme gaming. This build has it all. So strap in, because today we're going to be building the best bang for your buck computer in 2019. For parts, we start out with an NZXT S340 PC case. That's going to run us about $75. For a motherboard, we have an Asus Prime B350. That's going to be about $85. To pair with our motherboard, we've got a Ryzen 5 1600 CPU, $139. For RAM, we have a Trident Z RGB 16GB. That's going to be $135. For our graphics card, we have an MSI GTX 1060, running at a cool $280. To power all that, we have an EVGA 750 watt, $70 for that. And finally, for our hard drives, we've got a Samsung 970 EVO M.2 NVMe drive, that's 250 gigabytes. We're going to be using that for Windows 10. And for everything else, we have a Samsung 860 EVO 2.5-inch SSD, 1 terabyte. All you need in the way of tools is a Phillips screwdriver, some pliers, a magnetic parts tray, some zip ties for cable management, and thermal paste. The first thing you want to do when starting a PC build is put all the components in the motherboard before putting the motherboard into the case. Place the motherboard on a safe area, like the box it came in, pull back the retention arm, releasing the CPU frame, and place the processor gently into the socket, and give it a little wiggle. Make sure to line up the gold triangle with the notch on the motherboard. Push the retention arm back to its original position. Next, we are going to install the RAM. Do this by lining up the notch in the RAM with the notch in the motherboard. Firmly press down on both sides until you hear a click and the latches close. To install our M.2 boot drive, simply screw the standoff into the motherboard. Slot the drive in at about a 45-degree angle and push down against the standoff gently while screwing it in place. It is now time to install the cooler. First, you want to place about a rice-sized grain of thermal paste directly onto the CPU. This will help conduct the heat from the processor into the cooler. Place the cooler on top of the socket and align it with the posts. Firmly press down on the screws to thread them in place. And it's best to thread the screws on opposite sides before tightening them all the way. And finally, plug in the fan cable directly into the 4-pin labeled header on the motherboard. We are now going to install the I/O shield. Be sure to push it in all the way until you hear a click. Now gently place the motherboard into the case. We are going to keep the motherboard in place using 5 screws here, 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 and here. We are now going to thread the screws that came with the motherboard through the holes and into the case. Now to install the 2.5-inch drive. Unscrew the mount located in front of the motherboard. Go ahead and insert the SSD into the mount and screw it in place with the 4 screws on the bottom. We are now going to put it back into its original position. Installing the graphics card is very simple. Make sure the slots on the back of the case are free, and slot it in carefully until you hear a click. Screw the 2 points at the back. We are now going to place the power supply into the case with the fan facing down. This isn't super important, but it helps keep hot air out of the case. Once the power supply is slotted in, screw the 4 screws in the back, and you're done with that. We are now going to start plugging in all the cables. Plug in the 8-pin CPU power cable here, the motherboard power here, and the graphics card power here. For every drive, we need a SATA power and data cable plugged into the back. Next is the front panel audio, USB, and the power switch, all of which are located at the bottom of the motherboard. Don't forget to plug in the case fans as well. Installing Windows is fairly straightforward. You're just going to need a flash drive and another computer. You need to go to Microsoft's website and download the Media Creation tool. The Media Creation tool will install the Windows 10 image file onto the flash drive. Now all that's left to do is power on your new computer. Make sure to hit delete, F12 or F2 when the post screen shows up. Now that you're in the BIOS, you are going to make sure that the USB is priority in the boot order. Now hit save and restart to begin the installation. The Windows installation is pretty straightforward, just follow the on-screen steps. Now that Windows is installed, be sure to download your favorite web browser and ad blocker. Don't forget that you're also going to need a keyboard, a mouse, and a monitor. And if your monitor doesn't come with speakers, you'll need to buy those as well. The performance of this computer isn't over the top, but it can hold its own, with the ability to edit 4K video and get about 60 frames a second in most modern games. This is the best bang for your buck.